Hello. This is part 6 of my series of the most important document that you're going to come across during the real estate transaction. And part 6 to me is the most important part of this entire document. It's about the due diligence, basically your inspection period. It gives you all of the references that you need. And again, I insist, if you want to speed through this video and you're watching it on YouTube, you can, hit the 2x button and it'll go quick. But this is going to be a long video. And the reason why this is going to be a long video is because I see and I hear a lot of people upset at realtors or inspectors or the brokerage, or they get upset at somebody because it wasn't explained properly, or because they didn't read it, or because they didn't understand it, so on and so forth. In several instances of this contract tells you several times to consult legal, right? To get legal advice from an attorney. I have told several of my clients, if you cannot afford an attorney, get Legal Shield. It's a membership. You pay like $30-$40 a month, and you can cancel it if you're not happy with the services. And it works for a lot more things than just real estate. You can do medical collections and whatnot. There's different aspects and different uses for it. So it's a monthly fee, but it's better than nothing. Okay. So going back to the due diligence, this is video number 6. If you have not watched the other videos, I suggest that you go back and look at them in order and then come back to this. But we are in section 6. And we're going to be talking about due diligence. What is your homework? And one of the documents that is a 13-page document that I feel like people just sign away, but they don't even look at, is the buyer advisory. This section references the buyer advisory, which I'm going to show you a copy of. The buyer advisory is actually a live document that gets updated on a regular basis. So if I send you a PDF, I highly recommend that you just Google Arizona buyer advisory so that you have the most up-to-date document possible. And basically this advisory talks to you about the purchase contract. It talks about the MLS printout, the subdivision. It has so many components that I have actually created videos on the buyer advisory for you to look at as well. And I should probably create a lot more kind of like this, where I'm breaking it down in sections versus just, spending an hour or whatever amount of time explaining it to you. But this is a document that it references. And again, as you can see, it has live links to a lot of things. So going back to due diligence, usually, unless you are an investor, usually the inspection period is 10 days. I have a lot of clients that are from out of town, out of state, that they cannot be here within those 10 days, that sometimes they want an extension. Sometimes the seller might actually need a longer inspection period as well, because they cannot provide access to the buyer on a regular basis. And an example of that is somebody that has tenants. Sometimes tenants can make it a little bit more difficult to access the property because they have to be notified 48 hours before they access. And a lot of times when there's a tenant in place in the house, they do purposely make it difficult to sell the property because they have nowhere to go yet. Anyways, or they might be trying to get financing so that they can actually purchase the property. So back to the inspection period. You can specify if you need more than 10 days. And during the inspection period, at the buyer's expense, and this is a prepaid, non-refundable expense, if you end up canceling the contract, you don't get this money back. But you should conduct all desired physical, environmental, and other types of inspections and investigations to determine the value of the condition of the premises, appraisal, make inquiries and consult government agencies, lenders, insurance agents, architects, and other appropriate persons and entities concerning the suitability of the premises in the surrounding area. You should investigate applicable building, zoning, fire, health, and safety codes to determine the potential hazards in the surrounding area. Investigate applicable zoning. hazards, violations, or defects in the premises, and verify any material multiple listing service information. If the presence of sex offenders in the vicinity or the occurrence of a disease, natural death, suicide, homicide, or other crime in the vicinity is a material matter to the buyer, it must be investigated by the buyer again during the inspection period. Buyer shall keep the premises free and clear of liens, shall indemnify and hold seller harmless of all liability claims, demands, damages, and costs, and shall repair all damages arising from the inspections. Note to that, guys. Um, Side note, I'm going to come back to this with the AC inspection. Buyer is advised to consult the Arizona Department of Real Estate Buyer Advisory to assist in buyer's due diligence inspections and investigations. Again, it refers to the buyer advisory in terms of your due diligence, right? And it's going to be in section 2, the common physical conditions of the property buyer should investigate. And along the lines, things that I very, very, very rarely see buyer investigate is anything like soil problems, um, pests, the mold, drywall, radon gas, and also some environmental issues that affect the property. Um, so those are some of the investigations that I don't see a buyer usually watch out for. So then, um, oh, and also like the sex offender, right? A lot of people don't actually do their research about this when they're in the inspection period, and they should. It's kind of heartbreaking to find out that there's a sex offender living right in front of you. Actually, in my neighborhood, there was a listing that went up for sale, and I'm pretty sure that the seller was probably not aware because she was part of the HOA, and I feel like she would have done something about it, or I'm not sure. I think she wasn't aware. Or maybe that's the reason why she sold the property. Because right across from her property, there's a registered sex offender. So I think that, she overpriced the property. And then anybody that's actually investigating that, if a realtor is investigating, I know because it's within my community. But if a buyer finds out, that might put them off to actually purchasing the property if they have kids, or if they they feel fear for themselves. um so the buyer is advised to consult the Arizona Department of Real Estate Buyer Advisory again. So things that you have to do during your inspection period. I'm going to go back to the buyer attachment on the very first page, where it's telling you to conduct a general home inspection, a heating and cooling inspection, a mold inspection, a pest inspection, pool inspection, and a roof inspection. So I notice most people do the general home inspection. Some people do the heating and cooling inspection. But this is what can be somewhat off-putting to a buyer when they're conducting a heating and cooling inspection. Heating and cooling inspections, a lot of companies, they want to do a service, right? They charge a service fee because they're going to service the unit to figure out what is going on with the unit. So if you actually think about it, they have to open it up and do some testing and do some things to be able to tell you what condition it's in and if it's functioning properly and whatnot. So a lot of buyers kind of hesitate to pay for this because what if there is actually something going on with the property? And what if the seller didn't know? And what if they hadn't had any issues until the AC inspector came and opened it up and found that there's several components that need replacement or whatever it may be? So now we have an upset seller, right? Saying everything was fine until this guy came and opened it up. So sometimes buyers are a little bit hesitant because they've heard bad stories about it, or because of the cost of actually doing a service to get an inspection basically done on the AC. Obviously, if and I've already, for the first time in almost 11 years in being a real estate agent, I already went through this where the age of the AC was telling, and basically we asked for a brand new AC. We didn't get that, but we were offered 2-year home warranty to cover it if it broke down or whatever it may be. At the end of the day, the home warranty did not cover a full replacement. It covered a part, but it took almost 7 months for my clients to be able to get paid. And that was very disappointing to all of us, including myself. Nobody wants to see the happiness of a buyer be dampened by their AC not functioning in the desert in the middle of summer. And that's pretty unfortunate. So um, moving forward, I highly, highly, highly recommend the getting that heating and cooling inspection done regardless of the cost, because it's going to give you an opportunity to negotiate, even though we did try to negotiate, but it's going to give you a clear vision of what can happen in the future. After that experience, I'm going to tell every single buyer is home warranties, even though they boast that they will cover an AC fully, they will always try to repair until they can repair no longer, and that's going to cost you a service fee every time it breaks down. It's also a hassle to try to get them to do the repair. Sometimes it's just easier to self insure and have some savings for that, and be ready to do the repairs on your own versus having to wait months and months and months for them to fix this. Unfortunately, when somebody burns you that way, you learn the lesson, and you can share that with your future clients. A mold inspector. I've had mold inspections done on a listing of mine where it was a 2-story home. The upstairs toilet leaked, and they never really repaired the drywall on the first story. They just repaired everything on the second story. So what ended up happening is it grew mold between the 2 stories, and there was a little bit of you can kind of tell because there was a crack on the ceiling, and you can see like the wet spots. So I told my client to repair that, and I told my client that because we were going to repair that we had to basically disclose it on the seller's property disclosure, which we did. But when the buyer came along, the buyer had an allergy to mold. So she conducted a mold inspection. Obviously, it came back positive. And when I was there with the mold remediation company, one of the guys did explain to me that usually if there is carpet in a house, the mold inspection will almost always come back positive. He also explained to me that if you have like some rotten bread in some cabinet or something like that, the mold will almost always come back positive. So how reliable they are if you are not allergic to mold, you can almost guarantee that if there's carpet or water spots, that it will come back positive. So just keep that in mind. Pest inspector, I see this usually with the termite inspection being done, but I don't see a lot of actual inspections in terms of other types of pests be conducted. For example, when I purchased my property, I really didn't even conduct any inspections. The reason why I did that, and I do not recommend doing this, the only reason why I did that is it was COVID times. I was pregnant, I was in a rush, and I was competing against 4 other people. Because of my knowledge, because of my family's knowledge, I have the ability to go to a house and, learn a lot about the house without actually conducting a general home inspection. Do I want to conduct one so that I know what maintenance items to pay attention to? Yes, I do. Have I done it yet? No. However, my family is a contractor, and we deal with a lot of mold remediation and a lot of repairs. So that's why I felt confident about being able to do it without a home inspection. However, because I didn't have any inspections, now I know that in my house there is a pest problem, and the pests are scorpions, and it's not very attractive when you have a toddler and a dog. That's kind of scary, and that's always in the back of my mind. And sometimes when I go to sleep, I'm like, oh my God, what if there's a scorpion crawling around like somewhere inside of the house right now? I didn't have a roof inspection. I didn't have any of that. And my house does have polybutylene, so I might not even know that there's like a tiny leak somewhere in the house. Obviously it ends up showing up somewhere, but at the end of the day, I highly suggest doing all of those inspections. Um, Plumbing, the one that I think is not here, right, and should be, is a scope inspection. You can't really scope water lines, but you can scope sewage. And I've heard stories of people being able to negotiate a sewage replacement. Um, some homes, older homes specifically, they have clay sewage, or they have different types of sewage, deteriorating sewage, or maybe they have a huge tree around the sewage portion of the entrance of the property, and maybe the roots of that tree are now inside of the sewage, maybe creating some blockages where you're going to get some backflow. And some people, they purchased a house and they never even realize this. Because of the business that we're in, I've also gone to properties that got flooded, um, and they could have avoided that by conducting a sewage inspection. So one instance of this house that I went to go measure, they basically, the house got flooded because they never realized that some sort of metal item got stuck in their sewage system. And then they called, I'm not going to say the name of the company because I don't want to burn anybody, but they called a plumbing company, and the guy did their snake thing, and the snake thing got stuck in there. And he didn't say anything or notify anybody, and they continued using, their sewage system. Long story short, it ended up backing up. So at the end of the day, when this happens, most people call their homeowners insurance, and now the homeowners insurance wants to go after the plumbing company because of the fact that they left, the snake or whatever the system is to unclog, because they left that behind. Now there's proof that it was actually the plumbing company's fault. But anyways, you can find out a lot of things with a sewer scope, and the condition. And replacing sewage can be pretty expensive because it's not only, the sewage conductor, but if it affects any other parts of your property, it can affect concrete, it can affect drywall, it can affect a lot of things. So very, very highly recommend the sewer scope. Going back to section 6, and I hope you're not overwhelmed, but I hope that you're well informed now. Square footage. There's some people that care about the square footage and some people that don't care about the square footage. And square footage is, in my opinion, because I do have a background in drafting, and in measuring. I know how to measure homes, and I know how to come up with square footages. It's actually an opinion, because you can be off by a couple of inches, you can be off in several areas, and you might be measuring around maybe like a mechanical system, or like a how can I place it? How can I, like a dead area in the house where they didn't build anything. Maybe they just did some framing and then drywalled around it, and nobody's measuring that, right? So they might be that might cause a discrepancy when you're measuring the square footage of a house. And an appraiser will measure differently, and an assessor might measure differently, and a contractor and an architect and the drafter might measure the house differently. So there might be a small variation of the square footage in the assessor's records. There might be a small variation, from what the seller says the house is now at, based on an addition that they did. There might be variations. So if that is of importance to you, and it should be of importance to you because it does affect your taxes. It puts it in bold that the buyer is aware that any reference to the square footage of the premises, both the real property and land and improvements thereon, is approximate. If the square footage is a material matter to the buyer, it must be investigated during the inspection period. So if you are, adamant about the square footage being exactly what you want it to be, or the land being exactly what you want to be, you might want to get a survey, and you might want to pay for a professional to go out and measure that property. Wood destroying organism or insect inspection. If current or past wood destroying organism or insects such as termites or material matter to the buyer, these issues must be investigated during the inspection period. Of course, depending on the type of loan that you have, you might have to do it, especially if you have a VA loan. It has to be free and clear. And again, here in Arizona, it's not if, it's when termites are prevalent. And almost always, you're going to have termites at some point in your property. Flood hazard. That's very important because that can increase your mortgage payment on a monthly basis. A lot of people say that a flood hazard insurance is very expensive. It's not that expensive, but it does increase your monthly payment at the end of the day if your lender requires you to have one. So you must investigate the flood hazard designations or the cost of the flood hazard insurance during this period. Usually, with our property homework, and I'll show you how you can also do your own investigations when you're looking at an MLS site or on Zillow or wherever you want to look. Um, uh, you can investigate this, the zoning, and you probably get maybe three eyes on that, because I think the lender also investigates this to see if you're going to need flood insurance. So you might get a couple of notifications in the event that you do need flood insurance. And some people are okay with flood areas, because some people like to have livestock in a flood area because of how soft it is on the animal's feet, so on and so forth. I've heard different things. During the your investigation period, inspection period, you should find out if the home is insurable. If homeowner's insurance is a material matter to the buyer shall apply for and obtain written confirmation of the availability and cost of homeowner's insurance for the premises from a buyer's insurance company during the inspection period. Um, I've only had one instance in which the buyer of a property wasn't able to insure the house, and he found this out after the fact, not prior to, because he thought that he was going to be able to use the same homeowner's insurance that the previous owner was utilizing. But that was a mess. He had to do some repairs that he did not want to do because he had tenants that he was unable to remove from the property. He probably struggled around a year to remove those tenants from the property, and he was really stressed out about the fact that he could not insure the property because of the repairs that he had to make. He was also afraid that the people would actually trash the house, so on and so forth. So this is something that you should investigate during that time. And in this instance, there was a lot of waivers from the buyer purchasing the property that he had to sign, because he was purchasing the property sight unseen from a friend, and that was going to be a major ordeal for the brokerage. So we covered ourselves with all of those protections and waivers. So the sewage. Do you have a septic system, or are you connected to a sewer? Or do you have an alternative system for sewage? So usually this one of these is going to be selected. If you're a seller and you have a septic system, it is the responsibility of the seller to transfer the septic system in a working manner, and it's also the responsibility of the seller to clean it up prior to the sale. Why? Because it's your shit. You need to take your shit with you, or you need to get rid of it, right? So if there is a sewer connection, and if there is or maybe the property has a septic system but there's sewage available, and if that's important to you, you need to investigate that during the inspection period. I've seen some communities where there are houses that have a septic system and some others that have sewage, and a lot of times what happens is the community starts with sewage, and then they start with septic systems, and then they install the sewage, and they contact the homeowners and ask is, hey, do you want this free? But the homeowner doesn't want to mess with their landscaping, or they don't want to do something that's going to cause additional costs aside. Even though the connection might be free, they don't want to mess with their landscaping or something of that nature, so they stick to their septic and don't connect to to the sewage. So I've seen examples of that. Because depending on the topography of the property, it might be too expensive to actually get free sewage, because then they're going to have to fix the landscaping, or maybe they've paved over the area where they're going to have to tap into, so on and so forth. But anyways, you have to investigate that during an inspection period. Swimming pool barrier regulations. You're going to get a swimming pool form, and you can probably look it up from the buyer advisory. There are regulations where if you have children, you should have some sort of barrier. So that's going to be on 6. I think that's page 6, so that you can see an example that you will be receiving. Again, this is another one of the forms that I noticed that a lot of people don't actually look at, but you do get warnings. So if you click on here, it's going to give you many of the potential subdivisions, depending on the town. I work in all of Arizona, but I am located mainly in Tucson. Oh, and the page is not found. Let's see. I'm going to click out of this really quick. And I'm going to find a pool. Safety notice. Come on. I don't want to start a new transaction. I just wanted to open one that's already there. So here's the important notice about pool safety. And this one in particular has signatures for that. However, I have seen other pool safety notices that don't have an area for a signature. Either way, I just ask for a signature so that we know that you actually got one. And again, a lot of people don't even get one, and they still sign that they did on the purchase agreement. So going back to the purchase contract. And I'm going to show you the area where you're actually selecting that you got one. Swimming pool barrier regulations. So basically, when you initial this, you're stating that you got that form that I just showed you. Notice how many paragraphs there are in bold in this section, right? You know, usually when we make a mistake or if we make a bad decision, we tend to blame everybody else for our bad decisions. This video and this section is for me to specifically tell you that it is your responsibility as a buyer to conduct all of the inspections. And I'm also telling you up front that this is here indemnifying myself and the broker from that responsibility. Can I help you? Yes. Do I have more construction expertise than other realtors? Yes, I do. Do I have more experience than other realtors? Yes, I do. And the nature of my construction background allows me to be able to point out specific things to my clients that other realtors would not be able to point out, because they don't have the construction knowledge. They're not in the mitigation industry. They're not in the rehabbing industry, so they're not familiar with like water damage and stuff like that, and maybe they're a little bit newer and haven't had to conduct as many inspections as I have. But again, even though I can assist and point you the right way, it is still not my responsibility to conduct your inspections for you. I do try to find out what's most important to you and what you're willing to invest in. and then we move forward with that. But at the end of the day, when somebody is upset, if things are going downhill, they start trying to blame either myself, the broker, the inspectors. And at the end of the day, it's is what did you do, what did you not do? Okay, so I'm being upfront about that. And I'm also, if you're not working with me as a real estate agent, I'm also telling you up front that by signing this purchase agreement and by initialing this portion of the purchase agreement, you are indemnifying the real estate agent and the brokerage from any discrepancies or from anything that you did not find out during this inspection period. Okay. And some real estate agents don't even explain the purchase agreement to you. And if you're not reading it, well, then that's, you're bad. The buyer acknowledges, recognizes, and agrees that the broker is not qualified nor licensed to conduct due diligence with respect to the premises or the surrounding area. The buyer is instructed to consult with qualified licensed professionals to assist in buyer's due diligence efforts. Because conducting due diligence with respect to the premises and the surrounding area is beyond the scope of broker's expertise and licensing, buyer expressly releases and holds harmless the brokers from liability for any defects or conditions that could have been discovered by inspection or investigation. Okay, so if you didn't find out that there's a sex offender, if you didn't find out that there's like a super fund, if you didn't find out that there's a military airport around your house, if you didn't find out that there's train tracks or that there's road noise or something of that nature, that's on you. That's not on the real estate agent. Several instances, you are advised to, go knock on the neighbor's house and ask about, road noise or whatever it may be, anything that's important to you. At least point it out to your agent so that they can direct you the right way. A lot of agents will just redirect you to the buyer advisory. Why? Because that does remove liability. So keep that in mind. Okay, so know what you are signing. Inspection period notice. So when your inspection period is done, you have an opportunity to negotiate. This is the best opportunity for you to negotiate either the price down or all of the repairs done up front. Depending on the type of loan that you have, you might need the repairs to be done up front versus a credit. And also, depending on the loan that you have, you might only be able to get provided a certain amount of credits, so you might have to reduce the purchase price. So we'll get to that when we get to that. But this is your opportunity to provide a notification to the seller of the items that you disapprove. And basically, you're giving them 5 days to respond and to tell you if they're going to be repairing or not, or if they're going to give you a credit for that. So right here, if seller agrees in writing to correct items disapproved, seller shall correct the items, complete repairs in a workmanlike manner, and deliver any paid receipts evidence of the corrections or repairs to the buyer 3 days or however many days prior to the close of escrow. Okay. If the seller is unwilling or unable to correct the address of the to correct or address any of the items disapproved, the buyer may cancel this contract within 5 days after delivery of seller's response or after expiration of the time of seller's response, whichever occurs first, right? And the earnest money shall be released to the buyer. This section also specifies that you must tell the seller why you're canceling. Okay, in the time of COVID, that buyers were very desperate. They were placing offers on several homes at the same time, and then they were canceling on the seller last minute because their offer for the home that they actually want got accepted. So there was a lot of upset sellers. There was a lot of upset agents trying to keep that earnest money. In order for you to get your earnest money back, you need to provide a valid reason as to why you are canceling the service. And if you did conduct a home inspection, you're supposed to provide that home inspection to the seller so that they can update their seller's property disclosure statement. Verbal discussions will not extend these time periods. Only a written agreement signed with both parties extended. Basically, you need to get signatures on everything. A buyer's failure to give notice of disapproval of the items or cancellation of this product, and notice this is in all caps, within the specified time period shall conclusively be deemed as buyer's election to proceed with the transaction without correction of any disapproved items. Home warranties. Oh, I'm big on the home warranties. And you're going to notice here that it says that the buyer and the seller are advised to investigate various home warranty plans available to purchase. After the very hard time that one of my clients had, I have conclusively made the decision not to offer that specific home warranty. And I will be offering 3 or 4 options that the buyer can investigate. And I'm not going to give my recommendation. I'm not going to recommend any home warranties anymore. Because when I was doing further investigation on the home warranties, there were several home warranties in summer that were becoming unresponsive to some of the buyers based on the amount of demand. So with that said, the home warranty is not an insurance that you're going to get a brand new AC. It's also it's not guaranteed that you're going to get paid for whatever items they say they cover. It is, an extra protection if you want to have it for peace of mind, and it might cover some of your items. But as of now, the only thing that I know for sure that it generally does cover is a brand new water heater, but it does not cover the components like the connections and, all of that stuff. So keep that in mind. I am putting that responsibility back onto you because after, that experience, I'm never recommending a home warranty plan. So you can select one. You can say that you're going to order it or the seller's going to order it, and who's going to pay for it? You're going to pay for it or the seller's going to pay for it, right? We can do that during this portion of during this section, actually, of the purchase agreement. Walkthroughs. The seller grants buyer and buyer's inspectors reasonable access to conduct walkthroughs of the premises for the purpose of satisfying the buyer that any corrections or repairs agreed by the seller have been completed and the premises are in substantially the same condition as the date of acceptance. And the buyer does not conduct such walkthrough, the buyer releases the seller and broker from liability or any defects that could have been discovered. So there should be a final walkthrough. And it's actually stated twice that the buyer is not going to hold the broker liable for not conducting a walkthrough. So know this: if you're a buyer, you're not working with me, and your real estate agent is not telling you that you guys have to do a final walkthrough, by signing this, you're already holding them harmless. IRS and FERPA reporting. The Foreign Investment in Real Property Tax Act provides that if a seller is a foreign person, a buyer of a residential real property must withhold federal income taxes up to 15% of the purchase price, unless an exemption applies. If FERPA is applicable and the buyer fails to withhold, the buyer may be held liable for the tax. Buyer agrees to perform any acts of reasonable or necessary to comply with FERPA and IRS reporting requirements, and the buyer is responsible for obtaining independent and legal tax advice. Again, this whole section has mentioned a couple times to get legal and tax advice. Okay, buying and selling property has tax implications. If you know that the person selling is not a U.S. citizen, you might be liable if you don't withhold that 15%. And talk to your escrow officer about this. They have more experience. I really have not had the opportunity to work with foreign investors and to see that whole part of the process. But title companies work through this several times per year. So they're the best person and the best resource for that. So that concludes this long video on the inspection period and on your responsibility to conduct all of the inspections and to pay special attention to the buyer advisory, which I probably already lost. But anyways, going back to the buyer advisory, there's a video that I have on YouTube. Look at that. Review the buyer advisory. Ask questions. Again, my name's Adriana Vildosola with Coldwell Banker, 520-249-7029. I If you have any questions on real estate, it's best to just text me or give me a phone call because I rarely respond to YouTube comments. So it's probably easier to get a hold of me through my cell phone. Um, I hope this was informative. I hope that you have learned something new and that you realize what you're signing and what you're letting go of, and that you are indemnifying any real estate agent and any broker from being responsible for you doing that homework. Okay. Being misled to thinking that a property is perfect because it has just been renovated or is brand new is not a good thing. It's not ethical. And there are agents that will say specific things like that. And there's also other agents that really have no construction knowledge, or they don't have the experience that I do when it comes to remediation. So they might not even know that they should be pointing out specific things. With that said, thank you for watching all the way through. Please like, comment, and or share. I hope to see you on the next video. I know these videos are probably not fun, but they are informative. So I'll see you on the next video, Section 7 Remedies. Have a good one.